Alrighty, so for this Friday's CA baseline call, as just a reminder, so Sheridan's out. I'm going to be facilitating just for this week in her stead. She's very, very thoughtfully put together some very well structured agenda items and talking points. So I think for me, as per usual, it'll largely just be sort of more from a facilitation standpoint, but anything where I'm not able to provide a direct response, I will just be documenting for review afterward. Largely what the focus of the agenda is going to be today is going through the various considerations for invariant fixes across a few of the different profiles. As you'll be able to see, there's some pretty well called out discussion points and key decision areas for us to talk about. So hopefully nothing, and hopefully this provides the right amount of context and level setting for folks. But again, if anything's unclear, anything that I'm unable to answer, I'll just document it. So with that in mind, the first invariance fix that that we wanted to cover with this group today, if we're able to have a discussion and any type of a resolution on, is around allergy intolerance. So again, just to sort of speak to what's on here, the profile does have slicing on verification status coding, which indicates that if a verification status is provided, at least one coding shall be from the HL7 required value set. So then now IGP is now interpreting slices with a minimum of 1 to apply to parent elements as well. So the question that's been posed to the group is, should we be showing the sliced value sets as mappings or concept maps instead, or should we forego the call out of the V3 status coding now that the PCH, DCF, and core are moving toward the standard FHIR value set as well? So with that in mind, folks on the call, are there specific perspectives on this in terms of which way to go on it?
So is the problem that we've got an invariant and a slice on an element that has a minimum cardinality of 0? Is that what the issue is? Yeah, I think that's what her second point's saying here.
And for verification status, Lorraine, I do see just in the screenshot that it does note that for places we do have it as a minimum of 0.
Yes, I think that's actually reasonable in the baseline. I don't know that we want to mandate verification status in the baseline.
A challenge because how else do we indicate that we should have, if we're going to put a code in, one of them should be this one?
Yes. I do think that the standard value set is important on verification status because it's one of those core understanding things.
Yeah, as long as it's a required value set and the code slice is required, then the requirement is to have one from the specified code set.
Yes, but it's the best way to say we're not requiring one, We wanted to leave it 0 to start, but if you have it, it should be the required value set. What's the best way to say that?
Oh, well, just make the data set required. The slices, however, is optional.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, that makes, I'm not sure why, of course, this stuff was all done years ago, so before the time I got involved, so I'm not sure why we didn't just make the binding strength required.
Right, it should be required rather than preferred, isn't it? Okay, yeah, so it is required.
So then what's the benefit of the slice?
And it's 1-to-1. So what this is,
Verification status itself originally is 0 minimum cardinality, the parent element. In codable concepts, trying to slice within the codable concept has always challenged me.
well, yeah, but you're oh, you put a slice within the codable concept rather than a slice on verification status. What's a slice in the coding? That's weird.
I agree it's weird, and there's a few other places we did that, and that may have just been the level of understanding we were at when we did this
Okay.
almost 4 years ago now.
Yeah, because you want to have a slice on codable concept, and on the slice, the required data set would be value set would be those codes. You'd make now. Do you want to make the slice optional?
Want to make the whole codable concept optional, but if you've got one, they want to say at least one of the codings has to be this.
Okay, then why
That's
are you?
what they're trying to say.
Oh, okay, then don't slice it at all. The slice is adding no value. In fact, the slice is going around what you want. Really, what you want to just say is verification status is optional with a required value set of your status codes. And that way, if they do in fact fill in a verification status, then by definition, one of the codes must be from the value set. So I wouldn't slice it at all.
That makes infinite sense to me. I don't know if it does to others. And if there's anyone who was in the original conversation about how we came up with this invariant, that would be useful.
I think the main driver for this as well, and it's just captured here or shown here, is just the validation issue, or the error that's shown, where dot coding has a minimum of 0, but the slice is added to a minimum of 1.
Yeah, well, I think that's a downstream effect of the fact that we weren't really sure how to say what we wanted to say.
Yeah.
So that's why I was stepping back and saying, okay, what do we want to say? We want to say this is optional, but if you have it, then at least one of the codings in this codable concept has to be this value set.
Yeah.
And Paul's right. You can do that by
removing the
just putting
slice.
your binding.
Yeah. Remove your slice
Yeah.
and simply put it in as a required binding.
Remove the slice, put standard FHIR value set.
But with the
As the
binding
required.
required.
Yeah, as binding being required. Okay. Well, I can flag that as the outcome.
But you also want to say that the info value set is a preferred one.
Is it a subset of?
I don't know.
I don't know what you mean by that value set is preferred.
Well, so I'm looking at this. It says slicing status code, binding to allergy intolerant status code preferred.
Yes, but is the allergy intolerant status code the same value set as the HL7 FHIR one?
Well, that would be silly to have two slices for it.
Well,
Right.
that's right.
It would be wrong, actually.
But
Yeah.
if it's a required value set, you can't use anything outside of.
Well,
No, you
hang
have
on,
to
no.
use whatever's in there plus.
Yeah, you can add additional codings, but you have to have at least one coding in the codable concept that is required.
So,
The required value set.
Are we sure about that?
so what do you want to say?
Yeah.
Do you want to say you must choose something from the standard code set? Do you want to say you could, but you could use something from this other value set? Or you could use something else if necessary? Because those two statements are in conflict. The required says you must use one of these. The preferred says, well, you could use this or anything else on the planet you wish.
Yeah.
And that's probably not what you mean.
I know that with
Well, and there's no.
I know that with the framework, FHIR is going to just be recommending the verification status from HL7.
Well, yes, but I was going to say there's no info weight value set, right? Previously it says here HL7 required value set, and then you're talking about the FHIR value set. But are they actually different? Are we talking about the same value set? I can't read the actual bindings on the screen, so.
Yeah, I'm going to go actually take a look at that in Terminology Gateway.
Because it says it's bounded to HL7, not InfoA.
So, well, the other thing is that allergy intolerance status code is the status code, not the verification code.
Right. These are two different elements. No, these are two different slices.
Yeah, so it looks like they're slicing the status code onto the verification status, which I don't think would be correct.
I agree that's not correct.
They're actually independent. And the status code is.
Right, but the status code is a separate element, and this is a slice of verification status.
Okay, so what does verification status look like without the slicing? Where are we? Allergy intolerance? I'll take a look. Because I think it's just a codable concept, which means it just has the system and the code. Status code is not a separate element. It's actually a different named slice.
No, there's an element called status.
Is there?
On allergy intolerance.
Okay.
And I've just looked up that value set on Terminology Gateway, and it is the status codes: active, canceled, confirmed, present, invalidated, proposed, refuted, resolved.
Yeah, but is that a separate data element?
Verification status codes are that it's been confirmed.
All right, hang on. Let me.
Yeah, you definitely don't want the base status code value set for verification status. You need the confirmed, and I think there might even be a refuted in there or something. But yeah.
Okay, just a second. So you're saying there's a status and there's a. You don't mean clinical status, right? You mean some other field called status?
So there's an allergy intolerance, there's a status.
Okay, there's a clinical status and there's a verification status, then they're both just codable concepts.
Right. So the clinical status is the one with like active, inactive, resolved. The verification status is unconfirmed, confirmed, refuted, entered in error.
Right.
So there, the status code that's here should actually be in the clinical status.
Oh, okay, yeah. So get rid of that because that doesn't belong here either.
Are you sure, Joni? Because I'm looking at allergy intolerance status codes. It's got confirmed, present, proposed. And that's the same as, same kind of things, resolved. Same kind of things as is in verification status.
Verification status is actually unconfirmed, presumed, confirmed, refuted, entered in error.
Right. So
Clinical status
Right.
is active, inactive,
Active.
resolved.
Right.
yeah. So
That's a different thing.
the InfoWay value set is bound to SNOMED CT codes saying active, proposed, confirmed, present. So it's got both.
Well, that's
Actually,
That's
it's not.
When
But
you
it
say
says
or when it says required though, that says you can't extend the value set. It's a
Right.
fixed value set.
correct.
Is it?
Well,
I don't think that's what you really want when you're putting
But-
it, unless you have that slice, because if you want to put some other value, you can't.
Well,
Just
actually,
a second.
it-
Yes, you can, but you do it a different way. So you must supply one code from the code set, and then you may supply additional codes.
yes.
I have to see how are you putting that in if you're saying required for this binding.
Because the a codable concept does not contain a code. It contains an array of codes.
And one of them must be the required one, but the
Right.
others can be other things.
So if we had a code and we said it was SNOMED required, then there must be one SNOMED code. But there could also be an ICD-9 code, ICD-10, your local, internal diagnostic code, etc.
So if you have to provide one of the ones that is in the verification status, and this is saying, oh, but we want you to repeat it coming from the InfoWay.
Yeah,
Well, the slide says we're not talking about the InfoWay values set.
It's just any other set. The thing that I keep getting stuck on is because I know like with the gender, it's a required binding, and that means we can't add anything to it. And we can't put a different value in because
Yeah.
It
some of the
also
ones we
doesn't
use aren't in
repeat.
there.
but administrative gender is a code, not a code.
Not a codable concept.
Well, right, and a codable concept
Okay.
contains both text and an array of codings, whereas gender just contains a single
Single
code.
coding, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the key thing is it's an array of codings. Now here you've also scoped it down to say, oh, but it can only contain one. So there's a whole bunch of machinery that's gone into
No.
this definition on the screen. Yeah, because you changed the cardinality of the coding in the verification status. Instead of it being an array of codings, it's been limited to one coding.
Where do you see that?
Right on the screen, right in the middle of the box down at the bottom.
On the slice for verification
Yeah,
status.
coding : HL7 verification status 1.1 coding.
There is exactly one coding that matches
That slice.
that slice.
No, what it's saying is you can only supply one coding.
No.
I think Elliot's right on this case. In the
I
slide.
disagree. It's creating an array of length 1.
That would
Well,
be
that's just
up
one
on
slice.
the second line
Yeah.
where it says
So-
slices for coding.
the verification status element is 0 to 1. Within
Slices.
verification status, the HL7 verification status slice is 1 to 1. So you couldn't have the other slice because then you would have 2.
No, because it's the slices for coding. The second line there says 0 to many.
Yes, because the coding slice isn't
But
closed
guys,
off, say you can only have that.
verification status does not permit multiple arrays.
Correct. It permits a single array.
Right, which can be only one element deep if you're using it for verification status.
I disagree.
Yeah, I don't see it
says on
that way.
screen.
No, it
No,
says you can only
I
have
don't think
one.
it says that.
So
So
Paul, what I think it says is that in the lists of codings, one and only one of those can be HL7 verification.
No, by
status.
definition, if you made this 0 ... star and had a required binding, by definition, one of those entries must come from that code set.
Yes, but that's also what this is trying to say, because it's talking about
No,
the
this is changing
slice,
the
say,
length of
one
the array.
I
So
don't think
no.
so.
this error says that the verification status at the very top of this, like at the very top of this tree, is 0 to 1.
Right.
But the HL7 verification status is 1 to 1. So the minimum is 1, but at the top level, the minimum is 0. It's saying that there's a mismatch between that and that.
Right.
Mhm. However,
I agree with that, but I don't think that's the point that Paul's trying to make.
Mhm. Although I think the point that Paul's trying to make, we may not need to resolve, because if we step back and say, how do we code exactly what we mean, then we're not into the interpretation of the slices within the array. Because when I read this, I said, because it's relative to the slice, to me it says one of the elements in that, we have a slice that says one of the elements in the array must be
Okay,
HL7 verification.
I appreciate what you're trying to interpret, but if you just, why don't you just bring up the definition of a required binding?
Yeah, well, the required binding solves this without the slice. I agree with you on that too. So if we step back from worrying about the slice and get rid of the slice,
Yeah, get rid of the slice
and then just say
completely.
what we want to say.
Yeah.
Well,
Because
so
yeah.
the required binding, let me just double check this verification status, is already there in the base resource.
Right.
So if all we were trying to say was you need to use the required binding from the base resource, we don't need to say anything.
Right.
The additional thing we are trying to say is that as well as that binding, we would prefer you also include something from the info way value set.
Okay, so
I didn't get
in the
that
required binding in FHIR, the very last sentence of the required section says, when an element is bound to a required value set, derived profiles may state rules on which codes can be used, including removing codes from allowed use, but cannot specify new or additional codes for these elements.
Well, that's true. You can
So
specify a subset.
verification status
Yeah.
has a required binding to the verification status codes. So wouldn't that mean that we can't even use this other value set binding?
No, those two things are.
Because that would be specifying new or additional codes.
No, what they're telling you is that when they give you a required value set, or required code system, if you will, that you can in fact create a value set which is a subset of those.
Right, but you
create
can't
a
add
value set
elements.
which is a superset of those. But only one element must come from that. So if you will, going back to my example of if I have a field which has a required binding to SNOMED, I don't necessarily want any possible SNOMED. I may just want the diagnostic codes.
But verification status only allows for one value. It's 0 to 1.
No. It only
Where do you
allows
see
for
that?
one instance of an array.
Right underneath the red. Verification status 0 to 1.
There is
Zero to
only a
one
single
codable
codable
concept.
concept allowed. But a single
codable-
codable concept can have multiple codings.
Right.
Yes.
Okay,
It's an array
but
of
it's a
codings.
required binding to
Yeah.
the
And one of
HL7
those
value set.
codings, therefore, must come from the
That
required value set.
Right, which means that this slice, which has things that are not in that the first slice for status code has things that are not in the required value set. So
That's
we
Which
cannot
is fine.
add those.
It is
That's
an
fine, actually.
okay. The codes must be an array of codes. Sorry, it is an array. There's no choice, right? What you get to set is the length of that array. If it's a required value set, then there must be an element from that value set, or from that code system, if you will. You could have specified a value set which restricted the number of candidates, but you could put additional codes in. So you could put in, as I said, if it was required SNOMED, then there must be one SNOMED code. If I put in required to the SNOMED diagnostic codes, then it would have to be one of the diagnostic codes, not any SNOMED code, as part of the validation. But I could put in an ICD-9, an ICD-10, etc. I could put more elements in that array.
That sounds to me like extensible, not required.
No,
Yeah.
no. That one element must be drawn from SNOMED. Other elements in that array can come from other code systems.
But the
So-
verification status only allows for one value.
No,
No, that's
it
not
allows
true.
only a single codable concept in there. But a single codable concept has multiple codings in it.
Yes.
Right, because it's not a
And
single coding, it's an array of codings. What's wrong here is the verification status limits that array to one instance of coding. And therefore
I
you
still
Actually, I
couldn't
disagree
have
with
other
that
things.
interpretation.
So I'd
Um,
remove it completely. I think the thing what you want to be able to say is in verification status that it is required, and then you also want to be able to provide
I would really like to see an example showing that kind of a thing set up. Because in my mind, I'm still stuck with like Joni's saying that there's only one. You put it required, it has to be from that group.
I just put a link to the stuff about required in FHIR R4. Do we want to maybe open that up and look at it?
But with regards to the extensible, that extensible discussion is true when you're talking about within just one code or coding. When we're talking about a codable concept, we have multiple translations.
So it does say so when it's talking about codable concept with required, if a required binding is applied to an element with maximum cardinality greater than 1, the binding applies to all the elements.
Yes, but don't forget you got
Where is
cardinal
that?
level here.
I dropped the link in the chat.
It's in
Because
4.1.4.2.1 in the current version. I don't know what the numbers on the link.
Yeah, in R4 it's 4.1.5.1. I dropped it in the link.
okay, hang on.
If a required binding is applied to an element with a maximum cardinality greater than 1, the binding applies to all the elements.
Right,
yes,
but it's
this
not greater than 1.
Right. So which
But Johnny, the one thing it's referring to is not a scalar, it's an array.
Look at the paragraph immediately before.
The one thing that's being referred to is an array, and what the required says is one of those elements in the array must use that code set. Other elements in the code set do not.
But how can you send multiple values in there?
It's an array.
well, codable concept has multiple codings in it, Joni.
Literally, I can put
Okay.
go back to my example. I can have one data element for diagnosis, right? And it's 0.1. And if I included diagnosis, and I could have said it was required for SNOMED, array element 1 contains the SNOMED code. Array element 2 contains an ICD-9. Array element 3 contains my internal code for that diagnosis for my EHR. So there's 3 different elements I stuck inside that one codable concept.
So I'd like to see how that's shown in
That-
the profile in the design.
Well, you don't need to specify anything for that profile, because what you're not specifying is what it is for the other items. Now, to specify the codings for the other items, I don't know if you can do that through slicing, or whether you'd need to do that through putting in a FHIR path expression in order to say that that one of the items must be from that other code set.
I think you can do it through slicing. I think you can also do it using additional bindings.
Yes, I
Additional
think
bind, it doesn't
great.
work.
But
Additional
the
binding?
question is, yes. The question is, do we really want to? Stepping right back here. The question in bold is saying that the data framework and core are binding to the standard value set, FHIR value set for verification status. Do we really want to bring in another value set other than that one?
Yeah, and Lorraine, I think that was the question to begin with, even in the one that Sheridan had framed up here is, as far as what's in bold here, one of the options would just be to forego that call out, and really just, oh, sorry, I totally rearranged that. Now that the PCH, DCF, and core are moving toward the standard FHIR value set.
Yeah, I would say to remove the status code slice.
I would remove them both. They're redundant.
Yeah, you don't
Yeah,
need.
well, if there isn't a status code slice, then there's no need to be able to distinguish it from
Yeah,
the verification status. They just have
Yeah.
a verification status slice, and therefore there's no need for slicing.
exactly.
Yes. And actually, in this case, it means that we're not any different from the base. So we don't need a file of
Yeah, the additional
elements.
bindings is an extension. Yeah, you could do that.
But when it comes back down to it, do we have V3 implementations of allergy intolerance? I think there's some in the PIN, the pharmacy systems. Yes, as I sort of go back to my 20-year-old brain, 20 years ago brain. We did use the V3 allergy intolerance codes in PIN, at least in Alberta, and I'm sure in Saskatchewan, because they were almost the same systems.
So is that InfoWave value set actually like the V3 value set?
Well, that's what it says here in bold.
It's SNOMED CT. I just downloaded it.
Yeah. So I don't know why we're even referencing V3 status.
Well, there's some places where we've used V3 value sets because it's appropriate in the
Right,
context.
but in this particular case, I don't understand why we're saying the V3 status coding with respect to this discussion.
As it is, if, as Paul pointed out, if you're in a situation where you needed to provide the V3 status coding, you could provide the FHIR binding and the required binding, and then provide another coding that's the V3 status coding. You could still send it. Like, nothing about going back to what the base says restricts that. Okay, I think I'm going to make a motion, and you can beat it up if you like. I'm gonna move that we remove the slicing from the verification status element and leave the constraints on the verification status element the same as the base standard.
I second.
Discuss, throw stones, whatever.
My brain hurts now.
Understood. Well, I'm glad we're able to sort of dig into this, so I think it'll help us with some of the future ones as well. So based on, Lorraine, what you noted, and I've got this written down here as well. I think we kind of circled back to this a few different times, just in terms of what this would be like to remove the slice and just have it the way it's done in the base. Any other thoughts from folks on the call? Just in considerations for or against?
The only thing is I prefer if we said it went to whatever it's going to instead of to base, because that's kind of a nebulous term. If we know what the values actually are.
I just didn't want to go look them up while I was sitting here.
What, the values from verification status?
Well, no, whatever the base says or the core says, whatever that we're saying we want to match to, rather than saying matching to core, match to whatever core currently has, whatever that is.
Well, we could name the value set in the motion if you like. I just didn't want to look up the name of the value set because I'm looking at my iPad right now.
Well, but there's no need to do that, because if we don't say anything, we get the requirements from.
Yeah, you just
Base.
name that whatever's in the base of FHIR, which is
Yeah.
unconfirmed, confirmed, refuted, entered in error.
Unless we feel we want to supplement that somehow, there's no need to say anything.
It's just a
Right.
matter of it's nebulous. So, I mean, whatever, if you guys are good with it, go with it. It's just, I tend to like to see things pointed out to specific instead of a generic thing.
Well, in the profile, there's no need to say anything. If you want to clarify in the motion that the
Or
effect
maybe-
is that we are then using the FHIR value set that contains the values that Jody just listed, you could add that to the motion if it makes the motion clearer for you. But the effect is that we don't have to make any constraints in the profile. And ideally, that's where we want. We only want to make constraints in our profiles where we're actually different from FHIR core.
Yeah.
Because it'll still show up if you look at the profile and you look at the full view, those rules will still show up. It's not that they're not there. It's just that we're not making additional rules on
Yeah,
the
we're not
core.
changing. Yeah.
Are you comfortable if we leave the motion as is? Would you want to vote against it if we did, or?
I wouldn't
do you
vote
want-
against it. It's okay. I mean, it's just personal preference, but that's minor. So it's got the intent is there, so that's the main thing.
Well, and as I'm taking this down, I can also say, like Randy, to that point, that there's value in like some sort of supplementary call out of what's there, and sort of the rationale behind it. If anything, I'm not sure what that would look like, but if in some way that provides some added wording and detail.
I don't know how you would do that.
Okay.
Well, it would be adding our own description in the profile.
Okay, yeah, we can change the description and leave everything else the same if we want.
But
Yeah.
I
It's
just
better if
like
we
doing
don't.
that, because then somebody says, why are we saying something different here?
Okay.
It's just a
Yeah.
note we can add outside the scope of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you actually look at the if we take that out and we look at the full view of the profile, not the differential, and you click on verification status, it will tell you it's a required binding to this value set with these values. So that will already be there coming from the core.
Alrighty. So
Anyway, do we want to call the question or do we have more discussion?
What's left in the profiling? Code, patient. Restricting onset, I think. Reaction. Finding a reaction to CCTD. Okay, yeah, so we still have a need for the profile once we get rid of that. Okay. I'm good with the motion.
And Harsh, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I'm just curious, what was the basis of having this slicing in the first place? Did we inherit from US core, or was it some Canadian requirements we worked on? That's
If
why
if I had to guess, it was probably for historical purposes to allow the historical
A lot of
values.
the, and we have a lot of places where we applied slicings where we didn't really understand slicings 4 years ago.
Mhm.
But yeah, US core definitely did not refer to the V3 status codings.
There's no V3 status codes. That value set, the InfoWay value set is SNOMED CT.
Okay. Well, still, if V3 references it, it's still a V3 value set. But anyway, yeah, but SNOMED wouldn't have considered US CDI would, or US core would not have considered V3 anywhere. So I think it's mostly us maturing and understanding around how we deal with slices, because we've had some of these other things come up on stuff we've haven't looked at in 3 or 4 years.
right. I have no issues taking out status code. But I was just reading Thomas' comment on the chat, and it does provide an extra a supplementary sort of information. I was just wondering, if we take it out, we constrain the profile, and what constraining the profile makes it difficult for backward compatibility.
So taking out the constraint doesn't prevent you from being able to say the same thing if you wanted to, or doesn't invalidate any previously valid profile instances.
Well, wait a second. So just to clarify, sorry, because I wasn't necessarily listening on that with both ears, but I just perked up. So the gentleman who's concerned about backwards compatibility, are you saying that there are prior instances that you may want to move, which are based on a different value set?
There might be, Paul. There might be, because I'm just thinking from a because this is Canadian baseline, and if we constrain it, are we making it difficult for someone who has a status code, value set in place right now to map?
Well, the
Yes.
existing profile. Well, the existing profile said you couldn't use your own value set either. The existing profile already said you had to use. Well, hang on, my eyes are clear here. Well, that one is preferred, but there was a required value set on the HL7 verification status, so it already said you had to provide that. So we're not making any change in that respect, but we are saying that you have to use, and then in some cases, like status codes, it's one of the reasons they're one of the things that are often required, is because they're so crucial to the understanding of what you mean, that we need to be using the same concepts.
Right.
Yeah, so the two choices for why that was put in the first place, as I say, either handle historical stuff or when we were trying to figure out how to say this is what we want people to use without leaving it wide open.
Yeah, I mean,
It's one of those two.
before making a decision, can we put out on the forum just to say that, if someone has some sort of an existing status code and they oppose this,
But
like,
Well, they
what we're
already
proposing,
non-compliant. Yeah, go ahead,
what we're
Elliot.
proposing is to remove the mention of allergy intolerance of the InfoWay value set. Removing the mention of it, not saying you can't use it, not saying you have to use it, we're just removing any mention of it. And so if you had an instance that was using it, you have a system that was using it, that's fine, you can still keep using it. If you have a system that wasn't using it, that's fine, you can still keep not using it. The profiling doesn't restrict you from using that value set. What we are changing is how we're doing the profiling around, well, how we're doing the profiling, which right now is not legally the way to say what it is we are trying to say. So I think all we're doing is removing some errors. We're not changing what it is you're allowed to send.
okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. And we're gonna mention that somewhere, right? That it's extendable, like we can actually have a status code, even though the profile doesn't mention it.
Well, that's assumed in, if you're reading a FHIR profile, it's assumed that that if there's a codable concept and with a required binding, you have to put in that required binding, and you're allowed to put anything else that you want to. That's base FHIR. That there's no need for us to mention it.
Okay.
That would be my take.
Thanks, Elliot.
Yeah, I don't think we can start trying to explain the rules of FHIR in each of our profiles.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
we may have another area that points to where you can go to for understanding or something somewhere else in our documentation, but on the individual profiles, I think it would be a challenge to
No, I understand you. Yeah, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm aware of FHIR. It's just that just trying to understand from my experience that when we are developing a standard, that standard should represent majority of the use cases, or it could accommodate, and then we can have few exceptions here and there in a broader way. So I'm not opposing taking out status code. I'm just putting out my thoughts and inviting other thoughts just to see that if I'm on the right track or not.
That's just the challenge of following that path on there. It's kind of like a rabbit hole, because then what level do you stop putting notes in to go see the standards?
Yeah, Randy, that's the reason why we do like a landscape analysis of all the use cases, right? We invite everybody to pitch in their use cases, and then we have a baseline based on that. But anyways, this is
Okay.
Alrighty.
So
well,
are we
Go
need
ahead. Sorry,
more,
Lorraine.
so are we saying we need more, people need more time to contemplate this? Or are we saying we're ready to vote? I'm not sure which was the answer there.
I don't think anybody's against going for a vote right now.
Well, I know we're running out of time, so.
I mean,
So
from what
Lorraine,
I-
you moved. Did somebody second?
I made a motion and Joni seconded it. Mike hasn't called
Yeah.
the question yet.
Yeah, so I mean, what I've been documenting so far is motion to remove slicing from the element, leave the constraints on it as the same as the base standard. I think really some of the stuff that folks have said, we haven't, I don't think heard anything against it yet, other than just some thoughts around, like what might be possible to clarify, but at minimum, haven't heard necessarily motion against in terms of, the one that you had sort of, that you'd articulated, Lorraine.
Okay, do you want to call the question then?
Sorry, in terms of call the question, do you mean just like to invite for?
Ask for the vote.
Oh, okay.
Ask for the
gotcha.
vote.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So
You're
you're
carrying.
calling, so you're calling the question. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So you're asking if anyone is opposed?
Yes, asking for, sorry, guys, and like, I'm not sure if this is something that for the profile reviews, that it's a formal process now for, as we're doing this, so again, apologies if that's something I'm not familiar with, but in terms of how folks would normally do this here, if the next
We
thing
have
is.
been, we have been voting formally of late, so.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
So go ahead.
Yep. So for, can we confirm, because I know we've heard from a few, but can we just
Well,
confirm we have Lorraine and Joni?
So Mike, the way you would do it, because actually just making a motion or seconding it doesn't mean you're going to vote for it, because you could be against it even though you want it to be discussed.
Okay.
So normally then you just ask for who wishes to abstain and who's opposed, and then if you haven't spoken up for either those two categories, you're voting for. So that's the normal format.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So we have the motion. Then again, and sorry, again, I'm sure this would take less time if there was someone else sort of facilitating for this, but would the next thing then, Lorraine, just be to call for anyone to abstain?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any abstentions?
Alrighty.
Any objections? Sounds to me like it carried.
And it carries, well, we have 12 participants. I don't see any
Yep,
duplicates.
12.
So that means it's 11-0-0 because
Okay.
the chair doesn't count.
Right. Great. All right.
Okay, we got through one.
Yeah, absolutely. And also much appreciated for the quick crash course on the process for this. This is exciting to hear how this is going. Okay, so no, and glad that that we were able to get through this. I think just with 3 minutes left, rather than starting on the next one, that'll just be for the next call. But I do think that there's probably, just having looked at, and just by way of preview, the other ones are observation and smoking status. There may be some of the things that we discussed here that actually are some reusable patterns in terms of our thinking for the next two. So maybe that just means that the other ones we can arrive at things faster. But either way, I think still a valuable discussion. If these are things that folks felt differently on, it's important to have these.
Mike, is it worthwhile distributing the other two slides so people can think between now and the next call, and maybe Then
Yes,
we'll
happy
have,
to. I'll be uploading this onto the forum. So in my follow-up forum post with the like the link to the recording and all that, I'll be also putting a link to its location on the forum so that folks can review those ahead of time if desired.
yeah, but if we can look at the slides rather than just the recording, because it takes a long time to go through the recording.
Oh, that's what I meant. I'll be
And we haven't
uploading the
actually-
deck onto Info Central.
Okay, good, because we haven't actually shown those other slides yet. All right,
No, for
perfect.
sure.
Thank you very much for your help.
No
Thank you.
problem.
Yeah.
Thank all of you. Really appreciate it. And yeah, wishing everyone a great weekend. And yeah, looking forward to picking this up next time.
Great,
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.